how do we understand our purpose? I mean, we know that God has a plan and He has a purpose for us. He clearly says that in Jeremiah 29:11. And then people are always asking, well, how do I know what is my purpose? But once you discover your purpose, well then, how do you understand your purpose? You see, understanding your purpose is something entirely different and something that is often misunderstood. So, what do we need to do to understand our purpose? Well, how about we just take a seat and let's discuss that. So to understand God's purpose for your life, I guess we need to actually back up a little bit. You know, a couple of videos ago, we talked about Jeremiah 29:11, and then in the next video, we talked about Jeremiah 29:13. Now, I didn't know that I was going to be doing this mini series about understanding the plan and the purpose for your life, but I'm glad God put it on my heart because it's something that changed my life forever. So let's just back up a little bit. A couple of videos ago, and if you haven't watched it, make sure that you watch that video. But a couple of videos ago, we talked about Jeremiah 29:11 that says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans for a hope and a future." So Jeremiah 29:11 clearly says that God has a plan and a purpose for every person. So like any good father, a father, will plan his life out as a child. He's going to play football. He's going to be in sports. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. But a good father never plans for his son to get hurt. And that's where Jeremiah 29:11 comes in. He's got a plan for you, and it's for good, not for harm. So yes, bad things happen to Christians, okay? But our Father who loves us never planned those bad things. So yeah, a lot of people say, well, okay, Jeremiah 29:11 says that God has a plan for me, but what is that plan? Well, to discover that plan, you need to go a couple of verses down in that same chapter. And in Jeremiah 29:13, he says, "You will seek me and find me." When? When you seek me with all of your heart. So if you're seriously wanting to know, okay, God, what is that plan and purpose? On purpose, spend time with God. So if you didn't watch that video, go back and check out that video so that you can fully understand what we talked about on Jeremiah 29:13. So if you want to find your purpose, seek God with all of your heart. But today, now that we know that God has a plan and a purpose for us, and we've been seeking Him, and now we know that plan, how do we understand that purpose, okay? So I remember the day that God revealed to me my purpose, okay? And for each person, I think that purpose is a little different. But before I tell you the purpose God told me, let's kind of understand our purpose. You see, the worldview and, religion and different things, a lot of people, whenever they begin a relationship with God or become radically saved, they're so excited about their new relationship with God that all of a sudden they begin to think that maybe they should be in full-time ministry. And full-time ministry has a lot of definitions. I had a relationship with God for many, many, many years, and if you are following the videos, I was a powerless Christian for 20 years, going to church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday evening, teaching Sunday school, and all kind of things. But anyway, things changed. I went through a dark time in my life, and then, I'm seeking God, and He tells me I have a plan, I have a purpose. So anyway, long story short, Jeremiah 29:11 just altered my life completely, and I began serving God and developing a much closer relationship with God. Anyway, a lot of people begin to think they should be in this full-time ministry, which means, quitting their job and serving in the church all the time. And I was in full-time ministry. Now, full-time ministry for most people defined means that you're serving God, full-time, that 40-hour work week, and you're getting paid. Well, I was in full-time ministry, just not getting paid, but I didn't do it to get paid, okay? So, I was in this church, 200-300 people every Sunday, an associate pastor, preaching every opportunity I had, going into the prison ministry and serving there completely all the time, going in the hospital. So I was doing a whole lot and just absolutely loved it. But whenever you develop a relationship with God, it doesn't mean that God is changing you to be in full-time ministry. I tell you all of that to say, my personal opinion is that when you develop a relationship with God, everybody is in full-time ministry, okay? And it doesn't mean that you quit your job, just like Paul, who God stopped on the road to Damascus, he was in full-time ministry serving God, yet he was still a tent maker. He had to make money for the mission, okay? So understand that just because you have a relationship with God doesn't mean that you need to be in full-time ministry. Some are, and some are called to do that. And for me, I still work, and so I have to work to fund the mission that God's called me. But understand that, hey, maybe God will call you to full-time ministry to be a mission and go all over the world. But the important thing in understanding your purpose is understanding that as you spend time with God and as God reveals that purpose for you, while that purpose may evolve and may change, the core purpose will be there. So let me kind of share with you. For me, if you watch Jeremiah 29:11, I went through a very dark time in my life, and I got mad at God. Well, anyway, after I got over being mad at God and I got back on speaking terms, I love to run, and so I'm running and I'm spending time with God, and that's my favorite time with God, because me and God are running. There's no distractions. My mind is free to just talk to God without distractions. So one day I'm on this run and I'm running trails in the middle of the woods, and me and God are talking, and I stop out in the middle of the woods and I said, okay, God, what is it that you want? I don't care what it is. If I'm digging ditches in Africa, whatever you want me to do, just tell me and I'll do it. Okay, just tell me. And now, if you were in the woods behind a tree and you're watching, you'd be like, "Woo, that dude is gone cuckoo. He's crazy. He's out there talking to the trees, maybe the squirrels." Anyway, I'm out loud talking to God and nobody's around. And I'm telling you, just like I'm talking to you, I felt like I heard God in an audible voice. Was it an audible voice? No, but that's how loud and clear it was in my mind. I said, God, what is it you want? And I heard God say, I want you to preach the word. At that moment, I fell to my knees and I wept and I said, God, there's no way. I'm not worthy to preach your word, And God said, and do you think Paul was worthy? And I knew the story. Paul, who used to be Saul, went out killing Christians. He thought he was doing the right thing for God, but he was misled. I knew then that if God could change Saul and could help him to write a half, 2/3 of the New Testament, that if I committed to follow God, he would help me. So at that moment, still weeping and crying, I said, okay, God, if you'll help me, I'll go and I'll preach the word. At that time, I was still in this small Baptist church. I'm still immature as a Christian, even though I've been a Christian for 20 years. I go back to that Baptist church, really great young Baptist minister. And after church one day, I walk up to him and he's sitting on the pew with his wife next to him. And I says, Brother Jason, I says, I believe God has called me to preach. At that moment, his wife sitting next to him laughs out loud. And I looked to her and I'm like, what you laughing about? And she said, you won't be a Baptist preacher. And wow, like in the movies, it was like, you won't be a Baptist preacher. It felt like slow motion. And I was like, and I'm like, why? She says, because you're divorced. And that's what it seemed like in my mind in slow motion. So in the Baptist religion, she immediately disqualified me because I had gone through a divorce. No choosing of my own, because my wife had gone on vacation, never came back. Like a dog, scared, I tucked my tail between my legs and I ran back to the woods where God told me he wanted me to preach the word. And I said, God, I thought you said you wanted me to preach the word. And God said, yes, I told you to preach the word. I didn't tell you to be a Baptist preacher. Wow. Another light bulb went off and it hit me. And that's when I began to realize that, you know, a lot of people have been hurt by religion, because religion says you can't do this, you can't do that, you can do this, you can't, you know. And God said, I want you to preach the word. So then I understood my purpose. My purpose was to preach the word. Now, did that mean I was going to be preaching full-time in a church? Did it mean I was going to be some preacher that went from church to church? I don't know, because he didn't tell me that. He just said, I want you to preach the word. And so now, you know, while I did go through a season of being mentored inside a non-denominational church, because, you know, once I got hurt in the Baptist church, I realized, well, that's not where I needed to be. And so I went to a non-denominational church seeking where I needed to be. And I found a nice non-denominational church, met the pastor, asked him to mentor me. I was there for several years. I became, ordained as a pastor and so forth. Anyway, and I later found out that even in a non-denominational church, they have their own rules and regulation and their own religion. And so, of course, you know, now I'm not non-denominational. I am what I call a Bible-believing Christian. So anyway, let's go back to what we're talking about, and that's understanding your purpose. When you understand your purpose, or when you know what your purpose is, understand that your purpose may evolve. In the first couple of years, I was preaching inside a church, and that's where I was being mentored and I was being taught, you know, how to love people and how to preach the word and all of that good stuff. So understand that your purpose may evolve over time, but that core purpose, what you feel God spoke to you about, will never change, in my opinion. It might, because God does change his mind. But for me, you know, I understand God said, preach the word. And so for me, I preach the word, and I preach that word full time. In other words, no matter where I'm at. And that needs to be the same for you. We're all full-time Christians. We're not Christians just on Sunday morning. In other words, don't go out on Friday night, Saturday night, raising hell and being like the world, and then on Sunday morning you put on a mask and pretend to be this saintly Christian. See, if you're a full-time Christian and you're serving God, then you're a full-time Christian even when nobody's around. So when you go into the restaurant and the waitress is rude and slow, do you treat her like the world does, or do you love on her and realize that, you know, we don't understand why she's being rude. We don't understand what's happening. Maybe she went through a bad divorce herself that morning. Maybe she lost a loved one. You know, do we act like the world when we feel like we've been hurt, or do we begin to see people through the eyes of Christ, and do we begin to love on them? So whenever you have a relationship with God and you understand your purpose, I believe everybody's purpose, I believe God put us here so we can help one another, okay? To help each other, okay? To love on one another. And yes, we're in a world that's full of bad people, but we can't look at the bad. We need to constantly focus on the good, and we need to focus on how can we help one another. So understanding your purpose is to realize that, you know what? God does have a plan and a purpose for us. He makes that clear in Jeremiah 29:11. And then when we want to know what that purpose is, we begin to seek him with all of our heart, and that's Jeremiah 29:13. But then once when we hear what that purpose is, like I heard, God said, I want you to preach the word. When I understand that purpose, then we need to learn that we're going to grow through that purpose, and we're going to go and do things. You know, Moses' purpose was to lead the Israelites out of captivity, and he did that for the next 40 years, okay? And things began to, you know, change for him. So we need to understand that each person, while their purpose may be uniquely different, right? Everyone's purpose is to honor and glorify God in everything that we do. So we need to we're not going to be perfect. We are going to make mistakes. I make them every single day. But we can try our best to be more and more like Christ every single day. So I hope I've helped you to understand a little bit about trying to understand your purpose. that can be one of the most challenging things, but understand that as you seek God, you'll find him. And when you seek him with all of your heart, you're going to be able to spend time with God and begin to understand more of that purpose. God has great things in store for you, and it's never too late to be able to spend time with God and develop a relationship with him and begin to serve him. So whether you're 20, 40, 60, 80 years old, it's never too late to build a relationship with God and begin to serve him with all of your heart. God's got great things in store for you, so keep seeking God, and I know you'll understand the purpose God has for you.